Welcome back to the OTCM workshop. In the last video I mentioned that we'd just been sent by Planet Industrials some of their new 21-tonne industrial MDO wagons which are made for them by Accurascale, and that we were going to do a weathering job on them to make them nice and dirty and fit in on the layout. Well, here they are, and in this video we're going to take a look at the various stages I employed to take these wagons from looking nice and clean like this through to something much dirtier looking like this, and you can see the difference between the right hand wagon which is clean and the left hand one which is half weathered. I just need to finish the inside on this now. So as I mentioned earlier, these were sent to us by Planet Industrials specifically so we could show what could be done with these wagons and the scope they had for a bit of weathering and customisation. As such, I'm not going to be reviewing the wagons. Needless to say, they're built by Accurascale. Anyone familiar with the Accurascale products will know the sort of standard their products are made to, so I'll let you make your own decisions, and I'm going to focus purely on painting and making these look dirty. So how do we go from an immaculate bright orange wagon that looks like this and turn it into something far more weather beaten and looks like it's been out and about in an industrial setting like this? So first job for me to do on these, because I use 3-link couplings, is I'm going to remove the factory fitted tension lock couplings and fit the factory supplied 3-link couplings. To do that, it's very simple. 2 screws either side of the NEM pocket and a small spring that pulls out. Get those removed. We'll get the 3 links in. So before we get started on the body, I've just given these a quick whack over with some mucky paint over the chassis, just to bring them down into a sort of weathered state. As you can see, it's a sort of mucky black brown colour. It's amazing that going from black to that mucky brown colour makes an instant change. I mean, look how much better that looks already, just taking the shine off the chassis, making it look more realistic. So next stage is to tackle the insides, which are black as they come from the factory. So I'm going to repaint these into a rusty colour. To do this, I'm using a mixture of Tamiya Whole Red and Tamiya Gunmetal, and I'm just going to roughly mix them in the wagon. No fancy mixing trays or anything like that, just whack it on. It's a nice thick layer, it's a constant cover across the whole thing. So I'm doing nothing fancy here. I've literally painted Whole Red onto the sides of the wagons, and while it's still wet, I'm adding the Tamiya Gunmetal, mixing it in with the paintbrush as we go. Just working my way around the sides and the bottom of the wagon. Want to make sure the whole lot's covered. We can add a little bit of weathering powder later to add some variance if necessary, but generally they look pretty good just like this, and it's quite a realistic replication. So it's now time to turn our attention to the body. Now I'm applying a wash over everything, which we'll then clean off at the end, so don't panic too much. It makes it look like we're making a complete mess. So as I usually do when I'm weathering wagons, I'm using a mix of Tamiya paints here. We've got Tamiya Flat Brown and Tamiya NATO Black, mixed roughly 50-50. There's a small amount of Tamiya Flat Black added to that. What I usually use as a second-hand Tamiya pot, mix everything up in there, and then fill it up to the top with some thinners, which makes a nice thin wash that's ideal for applying in a situation like this. So as you can see, we're just whacking it across everything. It looks a complete mess. We just ruined our wagon. Don't worry, things are going to come back in the near future. So while we're waiting for the acrylics to become touch dry, which usually takes about 15-20 minutes, it's the ideal time to paint the wheels. Again, I'm using the exact same mix of paints, this time without the thinners in the pot. So I'm just literally using a brush and running around the circumference of the wheel. Also just picking up the chassis again, adding a bit more to any patches where it's a bit thin. And with the paint now touch dry, I'm going to take a cotton bud with a bit of thinners on it, and I'm going to start working in vertical streaks running down the side of the wagon, and this will have the effect of picking up the paint that we've just put on and lifting it, but leaving it in the corners and little places where it's adhered a bit more strongly than others. As you can see, the orange is starting to come back, but in a slightly faded way. So I always try and work in vertical streaks, though sometimes on framework it's almost impossible to do so, but we'll always finish with a vertical streak at the end. To make the wagon look consistent, it's absolutely vital that you keep changing from one nib to another on the cotton bud, and take a new cotton bud when necessary. Otherwise we're going to end up with the cotton bud absolutely saturated in paint, not picking anything up from one end of the wagon. You'll end up with a wagon that's clean at one end and dirty at the other. So we're obviously going to carry on right around the wagon, do the ends, do the other side. We can take off as much paint as we want, or as little paint as we want, depending on how dirty we want this to be. Usually take off a fair amount, but as you can see, it's really gripping around all the detail on doors and making it look quite impressive. So with the basic weathering done, it's now time to move on to the detail weathering, and you can spend as long on this as you want or as little time on this as you want. And what we're going to do is just work around with a couple of different colours, mostly in the blacks and very dark browns and greys range, and we're just going to stipple with a slightly stiff paintbrush various rust spots onto the body. Important that this is basically dry brushing, so we're literally leaving tiny little marks. We'll also paint in some scratches, things like that represent where the wagons have had a bit of a rough life. Just add some character to them. And as I say, you can obviously go as long on this or as short as you want. So here I'm just adding some rusting that would appear on the welded joint between the buffer beam and the body itself. And again, there's no restriction on how much of this you do, how dirty you want the wagon to be, how well worn you want it to be. Personally, I've gone for a relatively light touch, but obviously it's up to you when you're weathering. So with the detail painting done, that's pretty much the weathering finished. I've obviously popped the wagon straight out onto the layout to see how they look, and I think they blend in far more than they did previously, which is great. Really happy with how these turned out. Brings out the detail in the wagons and the tooling, and I actually really like the livery and how it stands out on the layout. So let's go ahead and do some shunting. So as I say, I'm really happy with how these have turned out. I think they look really interesting and definitely something a bit different. So they'll be getting plenty of use at exhibitions in the future. A big thank you to the guys at Planet Industrials for sending us these wagons. It's much appreciated, and it's been a great bit of fun having to play around with something that stands out so much from the usual grey wagons we're used to weathering. And hopefully the techniques that we've covered in this video will inspire a few others to get on and do some weathering. All that's left for me today is thanks for watching. Hope this video has been inspirational. Please do like and subscribe if you've enjoyed it. We really do appreciate it.